Welcome to the instructional video on how to use a jib, also known as a crane. The jib can be a little intimidating, but once you get it down and learn how to use it, it becomes a great tool to have in your arsenal. Let's start with why you would use a jib shot. A jib shot could be used to pan across the full studio, show behind the scenes of a studio, or set up an establishing shot. A jib can be a really creative way to add to your production, as well as getting that high angle view that your other cameras that are positioned on the floor wouldn't be able to get. So when you're the jib operator for class, the first thing you're going to do is put on your headset. After your headset's on, you have to know how to work the jib. And what's important is knowing what each button does. So over here on the left side, we have the focus and we have the exposure. So the focus is to make sure that your image is in focus. I know it's pretty self-explanatory. And exposure, also known as f-stop, is how you make the image brighter or darker. So the buttons over here for focus, or the A, will actually be autofocus to adjust your focus. Use the focus up and down to do it manually. And then F- and F+ will be your f-stop or your exposure to make it brighter or darker to get it just how it needs to be. Also on the left side, under the buttons, is the servo zoom. The servo zoom is used to zoom in and out. One best piece of advice when using the servo zoom is to make sure that your moves are fluid and consistent. You want to make sure that when you put the pressure on to zoom in and out, you keep the same pressure so the zoom is smooth the whole way through and not jumpy. Now, on the right side of the jib, has the joystick that actually controls the camera movement. Now, one thing to remember is right makes the camera go right, left makes the camera go left, but down makes the camera go up, and up makes the camera go down. Just something to keep in mind. When moving the jib into position, it's important to make sure that no cables are in your way and no cameras are in your way. You want to make sure that you're not blocking another camera shot, but most importantly, you want to make sure that you're not yanking any cables. You want to make sure that the cables are loose and they're not tight or tangled up. So when you move the jib, you don't want to be pulling these cables off and break, because they're very fragile and very easy to break. And all it takes is just being aware of your surroundings to avoid this. Another thing that's important to note is that these are a little bit loose, which is good because you can get it to a spot where you're comfortable to move the jib. But remember, this is not going to move the actual arm as much. You actually have to put a little bit of motion in it to get that arm to move. Another thing to note is the weights. The weights are actually used to counteract the camera. That is why there's weights here if you're ever wondering that. The heavier the camera, the more heavy the weights to balance it out perfectly. Lastly, but most important, is the jib movement. Now, when it comes to the jib movement, this is really where practice makes perfect. You want to make sure that you're able to move the jib fluidly and precisely, and also get it down to a point where you can zoom and move the toggle at the same time to really get those really interesting and artsy shots. The jib can really be used to add some really good movement to your production as long as you know how to use it right. So in summary, the jib, a little intimidating, but so useful. Spend the time, learn how to use the jib, and we hope you learned a lot in this video. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.